Love your suit.
Hello, beautiful people. I'm Oliver Perrin, coming at you from A Safer Space, a new channel made necessary by the impositions of YouTube's new policies and their new program of removing conservative voices, removing, in fact, any voices that don't essentially amount to parroting of socialist nonsense. So here we are, here in A Safer Space. What we can say is only ever half as interesting as what we can't. As Tim has observed, and Macom and Clancy have observed, whatever you say nothing when you talk about you know what. So we're going to be nice and friendly and open and compassionate towards all of the varied peoples of the world. So our discussion today, I'm welcoming back Mr. Rudisil from high atop a mountain. Our discussion today will be sort of an update, since we haven't had a chance to talk to Tim in quite some time, about what is going on internationally. He has rather interesting ideas about what he calls 3 legs of a new stool, but I will leave that to him to introduce. Before we get to the subject, however, since many of you have not seen him in quite some time, Tim, would you be willing to sort of give everybody the quick down and low on what the hell happened with you, on what all this was about and how your recovery is going?
Oh, I suffered a stroke, Ollie. I suffered a stroke about 58 days ago. I was laid low for 4 days, and I managed to crawl back. And I've been in the hospital and in rehabilitation centers, and I have spent over $130,000, believe it or not, of money I did not have. Thank you, Social Security. To get to this stage where I am much better. The patch over my eye is to train my left eye, the pupil of which is a bit smaller and malformed at this point, to behave and behave itself. I'm trying to get to where I can see properly out of it. It gets in the way of reading, So I'm trying to trade that up. It's not actually that I'm going Army Hearties and charging off across the deck of a ship. Though there are some interesting things we could talk about that. There are some things I'm in. I have a walker, and I have a wheelchair, and I am able to stand up and sit down and do a few things like that, and some exercises with various weights that I have. And I'll be about 9 months to a year, I'll be in fine shape again. But until then, I'm going to be, like that.
Well, let it be so. I think I'm probably speaking for many of our viewers when I say, let it happen soon, let it be so. May your recovery be swift and complete.
And I thank you, my friends, one and all. And now in my new mode of loving tenderness.
Right. Whatever you say nothing.
That's it. Oh, it's a wonderful thing. It's all good, Ollie. It's all good.
So basically your left eye is now exposed because you're trying to make it work harder to try to beat it into shape.
Yeah, arr.
All right, very good then. So we had talked shortly after you got back home. We didn't do a recording of it, but you had sketched this idea of what's going on internationally. I think what we can do is to maybe do this clip with a general picture of sort of what's been happening internationally since you've been offline for quite some time. And then perhaps if you're up for it, we can do a second one on the domestic situation.
All right, we'll give it a try.
All I remember from what we talked about regarding the international situation is that it is your view that we're kind of seeing 3 countries come to the fore that are going to end up each having sort of their zones of influence. I don't want to go too much further than that because it's something you had set forth as an idea, and so you're much better prepared to explain what you mean by all of that. So perhaps you can tell us what all this is about, sir.
Well, the three-legged stool is very simple: Russia, China, the United States. And when I say Russia, I'm putting Europe in with Russia because, as Trump has just made abundantly clear, Germany, the greatest economy in EU, is, gosh, hostage to Russia and all its energy requirements.
Is that Nord Stream 2 or some such, if not more,
Uh,
of those
who
similar
gives a fuck?
projects?
As Putin once said several years back, if Germany and the rest of Europe wanted to burn wood, they'd have to buy the wood from Russia. You know, come on, man. Putin has seen the writing on the wall. He knows that Europe is nothing more than a vermiform appendix to Russia. It's real simple. So, with that said, you have the United States, which is probably the world's greatest island and may be taking over Canada and Mexico before very long because the narco state of Mexico cannot continue as it has. Uh, it's totally lawless. And Canada is like, oh my God, what are we going to do? What clothes do I wear today to be the prime minister? You know, come on, man. Everybody's about had it with the drama teacher. So, I'm looking at this as like Canada's either going to draw much closer to us or it's going to get taken over by us, one or the other. It really doesn't matter to me.
And what is your time frame? Most people are not used to the scale which you observe these things on, so I want to make sure.
10 years, 5 to 10 years, you know.
Now, people are going to jump in and say you're totally insane that we would take over Canada.
Yeah, I'm totally insane. I've had a stroke. The thing is, man, I just don't give a fuck what people think. I never have, never will. It's what keeps me 5, 10 years ahead of them. Everything that they're doing now, I've already seen. I've already thought about. Come on, man. Smell the fucking coffee.
Well, speaking of coffee, things south of the border, Juan Valdez and his fellow socialist muleteers. What do you think is going on with this guy, Obrador? Because there are some odd signs that I'm seeing, some weird signals that suggest to me that he might not be the fervent leftist who wants to, take
you suppose
Mexico.
He got bought out by them evil, nasty narcotistas down there?
But I wonder if it might go deeper. It seems as though he's just the perfect foil to create every kind of justification on the border.
Well, he is, but he wasn't created for that purpose. He was created for their purpose. And their purpose is to get the government running in such a way that people are looking at the distractions. You got to remember, man, the narcotistas, the narcotics traffickers, are making so much money that it doesn't matter. They think Pablo Escobar made money? Hey, let me tell you, Pablo didn't make 50 cents to the dollar, what these people are doing. They've got every kind of narcotic coming in from China, right? They don't even have to make it themselves. They just manage it. Fentanyl, it comes from China. Oh, wait a minute, China? China's our buddy, isn't she? How come she's supplying all the fentanyl? Yeah, right. Come on, man.
So
Smell
we can expect perhaps some of the things that you had prognosticated in our videos on Trump's wall, with the U.S. taking a more active interest in reining in that lawlessness. At first, with the construction of the wall, and then perhaps projecting forward from there in a variety of ways.
In a variety of ways, especially with M16A1 carbines.
Or whatever they are. Yeah,
small automatic weapons. Yeah, M4s, M5s, whatever. Who gives a fuck?
Yes, well now
long rifle, go bang bang.
Yes, thunderstick. So we're looking at that's sort of the picture in the U.S., which we've touched on in terms of these international relationships with Mexico and Canada. But now, you had also mentioned, before we get to China, let's jump back over to Russia. You mentioned how Europe hangs off of Russia like a vermiform appendix. Some of our viewers who've been with us longer understand that means that Europe is like an afterthought, like a dangling organ that doesn't
Yeah.
perform any really necessary or useful function at this point, especially
Uh-huh.
vis-a-vis their natural resources and the fact that they have to
Sure.
bring them in from elsewhere. But before we get to China, what I do want clarity on in that is, what do you mean when you say that Europe and Russia are a thing you're thinking of as a unit?
Well, Russia has what Europe needs. Europe has what Russia needs.
Resources on the one hand and people on the other.
By golly, I think you got it. Yes, Russia has immense resources and no population. Europe has immense population and no resources to any meaningful degree. So they look like they go together, don't they? Huh?
Yeah, but it
Huh?
raises
Yeah.
the question of who ends up being in charge, because I can't imagine two cooks in that kitchen.
Vladimir Putin ends up being in charge.
Well,
That's why Putin has gone around and shaken hands and kissed babies.
what you call his
And
avuncular routine, yes,
yeah,
and
he
which is
gets
why
out there. Oh, goodness.
the European right is loving him as a sort of figure
Oh,
of
Uncle
nationalism.
Vlad. Uncle Vlad. He's such a man. Such a man. He even goes around with no shirt on in the cold, cold water and rides horses with no shirt on and does other stupid shit with no shirt on. Hey, give me a fucking break, man. Am I not supposed to recognize propaganda
And
when
so,
I see it? I'm sorry.
of course, you're supposed to. In fact, I
Well,
think
thank
that's
you.
why I myself speak with you, and so many listen. To what the ideas that you have to share. But now, what does that mean vis-a-vis the V4 countries? I mean, obviously Poland and the rest of them have real problems with Russia. Is this just another case of they ain't gotta like it?
Well, no, they're going to be made to like it. There will be all kinds of ways found for these people to get along, Ollie. This is the normal distraction process of huge populations. And they'll distract them and they'll get them interested in it and they'll get them to where they are willing to put up with this because they get this instead. Piffle. If they could just sit down and say, well, let's make a trade. Let's trade some population for some resources. It would make a world of difference and shorten up the time frame on everything. But
Well,
they can't.
there are some
Huh?
interesting signals coming across. I mean, not much has happened, but some of the folks on the Discord server were sharing links, and one of them was very interesting. I appreciate the viewer who shared it. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name at the moment, but you'll know who you are. The South African farmers are, in theory, sending families to Russia. There was a news story on Russian television and some articles published online
Sure.
about how a certain initial number of several thousands of these Boer farmers may be resettling in Russia. And guess where they're going to resettle them?
Where, Ollie?
In
Where?
the area of Stavropol, a little off from
Oh,
Krasnodar, which is basically, north of the Caucasus in the old Circassian regions.
Sure.
It's great farmland,
Mhm.
and it is Russia's southern border. And by putting in groups such as the Boers, who already, know how to operate with their lagers, so to speak, they're just like, they're a variant, as far as I'm concerned, of the old model of placing the Terek and Kuban Cossacks out there as frontiersmen to form a new border and sort of civilize the area. Now, things are not as rough, but these are groups of people who are going to know how to work together and how to farm the shit out of that rich soil.
Oh, I was going to say, with all the water they've got and all the soil they've got, hey, such a deal. See, this is what I'm referencing. Putin is able to go through basically the whole fucking world and pick out like the Boers and say, "Come here, kid, you interest me strangely. Come here, sit down, dig a little in the dirt." Okay, now what happens when you got these Boers and they've got thousands of acres apiece and they start raising goodies? Because unlike Russians, they're used to individual activity and individual effort being expended against a government that doesn't let you keep a tenth of what you make, and this government's going to let them keep a whole lot more. Hey, such a deal. Bring it on. Now, when I say that Europe is a vermiform appendix, what I really mean is it has no consciousness of its own. It has no will of its own. They have shown that with the way they regard the refugees. And Mama Merkel is having a horrible time right now, going back on everything she fucking said before, trying to keep her alliance with the rest of her party alive. No, bullshit. The U.S. is doing fine. We're going around saying, well, I think maybe we need to up these tariffs a bit and do this and do that. And our stock market's going through the fucking roof again.
Yeah, and you just probably saw the clip of Trump, who captured it on camera as he lectured the NATO heads in that one meeting. And what's so beautiful is it's the exact same shot with him at the table and the people across from him and around him. In this case, around him, whereas in The Apprentice, they were across from him. But he's basically doing the same riff that he's programmed into everybody's minds, where he's sitting at the table saying, you know, straighten it out or you're going to be fired.
That's it.
Instead of 2%.
That's basically what he's doing.
There's even talk about 4% now.
Sounds good. And 2% was unreachable before. It's all bullshit. It's all distraction. What you've got to do is look at what is the end result of it. And it's a three-legged stool. Now, China, to digress for a moment, has got a real problem because they're giving money hand over fist to Africa in the form of credit. And Africa is taking it hand over fist in the form of credit. But they're going to find out very shortly that it doesn't really translate into wealth in the world. It translates into wealth in relationship to China. It's like the game of Go. China's got all these little stones that are supposedly its color. But African stones tend to change color, don't they? African stones tend to change allegiances very, very quickly. So I'm looking at this and I'm seeing 3 players on the board instead of 2.
And that in and of itself, I mean, there's a lot about China that you're not covering here, and I imagine the reason why is
you want me to?
Well, it's been covered in previous clips, and so I want to point people to...
Oh, there's more than that.
Yes. Now, it may be some time before... well, there's always the future of our discussions that we can record and post. But for those who are interested, you know, this is on the channel Safer Space until the content strikes on Semi-Agog lapse. Gobshite, gobsmacked, Semi-Agog. Until those content strikes lapse, I will not be posting the old CHAINSMOKE episodes because they seem to really like to slap Tim's remarks with hate speech and bullying flagging.
I'm such a lovely man, so even spoken. Milk of human kindness by the quart in every vein.
Well, yes. And so, until those things post again on the Semi-Agog channel, which I encourage all of you to stay subscribed to, you can jump over and see the previous clips where Tim discusses China and its international shenanigans, particularly in reference to the One Belt, One Road, the Roof of the World stuff, the Chain of Pearls, and Africa, as well as South and Central America somewhat too. You can find that on BitChute. So Tim's not going into all of it. But one thing I wanted to point out additionally is the most important thing that I'm seeing there is that by having this 3-legged stool, by shifting it from this, you know, Cold War détente in which it was Russia against the United States, so to speak, or the communist world against the free world, first world versus second world. You know, so many people say third world this and third world that, and they never learned about first and second. We now have a situation...
Because they're retarded, Ollie. That's all. They're just retarded.
Retardates.
Yes, you got to remember that they're a little slow. They're going to get there. It takes them a decade or so.
So what we had before was this bipolar, if you will, arrangement,
Really?
and then after the so-called fall of the Soviet Union, you ended up, the idea of the U.S. as the one dominant superpower. So it was, this single arrangement, and then you got this idea that the EU was going to try to come up in that space and foster its little socialist and eventually commie experiment. However, we've now seen a thing where we've got three legs on the stool. We're seeing, we went from a dyad to a monad, and now we're going to a triad. And what's interesting about triads, even looking at a family situation where you have, three brothers as opposed to two brothers or a single child, an enormous multiplication of scenarios occurs. Instead of having the simple dialectic with thesis, antithesis, synthesis, this Hegelian thing that Marx got so shot in the ass with and then turned it on its head, as they say. We now have the idea of a triad, which presents enormous opportunities to have these power relationships shift. And I think eventually will leave us in a situation where one side is considered to be Russia, Europe, and the US. And eventually the other side will be China. But that seems a bit further down the road. So what do you have to say about how this is this fundamental change in dynamic from the relationships between two elements versus three?
Well, I think that what you have, to put it bluntly, come on, light up, damn it. There you are. Is that Russia and Europe are going to come together. They're going to form a union of sorts, whether it's real or on paper or just de facto. And that's going to form a union, whether real, on paper, de facto, whatever, doesn't matter, with the United States. Because basically what they're going to have is China is trying to take too much. It's trying to take the whole fucking world. And China's going to wind up regretting that move. But the president over there, the president for life, doesn't have an awful lot of time to work with. He's got about 20 years. And 20 years, given the state of Africa, the state of China, and the state of the One Belt, One Road territory, the String of Pearls necklace territory, and Africa, 20 years is nowhere near enough. He needs a lot more time. And he needs a lot more people than he has, believe it or not, because most of the people he has are peasants. They're not dedicated party members. Now, he's got a lot of people that are dedicated party members, but not nearly enough to deal with countries the size of the African nations, not nearly enough to deal with the One Belt, One Road construction project.
Or for countries like Brazil.
He's going at those by third partying it. He's getting teamed up with them. He's going to regret getting into Brazil, because Brazil is a, good God, it's a regular tar baby. No matter where you lay a hand, you're stuck. And there you are. You know, it's Brazil is an endless, well, it's kind of like owning a boat, Brazil is. It's a hole in the water in which you continue to throw money. You know, Brazil is nothing if not able to absorb all the money you want to give it. Brasilia, the capital city of Brazil, was set to be a beautiful, beautiful city. Have you looked at it lately?
It seems like there hasn't been any repair or upkeep since it was built in, what, the 50s, 60s, I think.
Looks
60s,
like
70s.
a real hole.
Yes.
I'm trying to be sweet. Looks like an excrement excavation. You know, I got nothing for them. they've got a small group of people who want to do something, but it's too small. It's got too little power, real power, and too much authority. And so it's going to go nowhere.
Well, let's come back around.
Classic.
Let's come back around then to this very interesting notion you've touched on, which is the Chinese exporting its population and the short, medium, and long-term implications of this.
There's gonna be a lot of Chinese bros out there, man. You know, they be good with the Mugu Gai Pan. You know, they be down with that. Yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting because China thinks that they can do things to Africa that they can't. They think that the Africans will be bound by their laws. They haven't looked at the way in which they have got the Africans breaking their laws, breaking their constitutions, writing new constitutions, doing all sorts of things. And they have yet to understand that what they've got with Africa is basically tribes and chiefs. They don't have any government. They have governance, but they don't have government. When somebody can be snatched out of office like that, the head of the financial system in a country can be handed over to somebody who's not even a citizen of the country and who decides to ship as much money as he can to India. Come on.
Talking about that Gupta stuff?
Sure. And the Guptas were running it fairly well. They were just
availing themselves of some of the perks, yes.
Well, they were just corrupt as all hell. But that meant nothing until this new president came in. And now he's got his own boys he wants to put in there. It just goes on and on and on. It's tribalism, Ollie.
And so they're extending, they're disgorging their massive population across the world. What is that going to mean for them? I mean, we saw what happened when the Brits pumped massive populations to places like North America and Australia, New Zealand. Those places ultimately became
Look at what is done in Tibet.
Well, yeah,
Look at what is done in Tibet.
Trying to absolutely replace the Tibetans.
Look at what is done in Xinjiang province.
Yes, in Manchuria, yeah.
But you see, it hasn't been
everywhere.
Effective. It hasn't been effective. That's the problem. It cannot be effective because these people have brought a foreign culture in. It's very foreign to the Tibetans. It's very foreign to the Xinjiangers. Not to mention which all them sumbitches look different than they do. You know, I don't want to be disparaging of diversity, but they haven't really got anything going for them, Ollie. They're going to be a lot of Chinese that are going to answer the question, do Chinese people taste like cod? You know, in Africa. And it's going to be wonderful to watch because the Africans are bitterly, insensitively tribal, and the violence is tribal, and the violence is also racial. Now, you tell me you can't tell the difference between a Chinese and an African.
Yes, the surface features are distinct enough that one is not left with any sort of question mark. But now what happens in terms, that's one dimension, which is the idea they're going to be spread out across the world in places that may become increasingly inhospitable towards them, given their colonial
When the money
program.
runs out, and the power runs differently. Yeah.
And there's a second dimension that you brought up in our previous talk when you had first gotten back home, which is what happens to these populations that have been separated from the motherland. We've seen what happened with the Englishmen who settled the U.S., and even though they're within a Commonwealth framework now, we've seen what happened with Australia, New Zealand, and Canada, and South Africa.
No.
And
You've
additionally,
got to look. Go ahead.
I just want to throw in the last piece. No. quite the contrary is required of you. But just momentarily with Thucydides, we've seen that, since time forgot, the idea of colonies remaining faithful to their nation or city-state of origin, that doesn't really happen. They eventually end up becoming resentful, jealous of their autonomy, at least with Western folks. And ultimately they become competitors to their points of origin.
Okay. Can I speak now?
Yes, sir, please.
All right, good. The Chinese are different, completely different. The comparable setup for the British would be India in the days of John Company, when all the Brits were marrying their Indian princesses, you know.
Going native, yes.
Going
sort
native,
of
yes,
the Richard Burton model, except without the part where he went home and married an English woman.
Exactly so. The thing is that these African women, and they're going to be women, they're not going to be men, because the Chinese are very chary of allowing any African men to marry Chinese women. They don't like that. They don't want that. They don't have enough women as it is. That's one of the problems they're trying to export to get rid of. The thing is that you're going to wind up with half-caste, if one may use that term, with reference to the Chinese and the Africans. You're going to wind up with half-breeds, half black, half Chinese. And they're not going to do very well, because you see, the mother imparts the culture to the child. And so you're going to get a lot of tribal culture imparted to a reasonably civilized Chinese person. Not going to work. On top of which, you've got lots and lots of them trying to take advantage, their fathers helping them, take advantage of the Chinese hegemony in Africa. So it's going to be a Chinese fire drill, no pun intended. It will be disguised. There will be all kinds of schools set up for the Chinese children of these black African mothers. And it's going to be most interesting to see how and if that takes at all. Because you see, the thing is that all the concepts that are going to be taught are going to be completely foreign to these Africans. Completely foreign. Now, it will work a bit for a while, but they will not become jealous. They will not become chary of their own individuality and so on, as the colonies of Athens did. But they will become incredibly distraught that their colonies aren't working out the way they wanted them to. They may even ship a bunch of the black ones back to China to try and indoctrinate them further. There are going to be many, many things tried. It really doesn't matter, because you cannot make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. You can't. Try as you like. Embroider it all you want. You still got an embroidered, beaded sow's ear. So I don't see a whole lot of hope for it. I'm of the opinion that we should allow them to go as hard as they want, because the Africans are going to kick them out after a bit. And they're going to kick them out with machetes. It's going to be slice, dice, and mugu gai pan right there on the spot. And they're going to taste just like cod.
You're just verging into insensitivity again. I remind you, the name of this channel is A Safer Space.
Well, I would recommend, so they could be safe, that all these Chinese build themselves crying closets in their brand new African homes, using 5/8 inch steel plate for the walls and the door, so they could go inside and cry when they feel like it.
Well, then, so what do you think?
Uh-huh.
Backing out from this, now that we have sort of this is, of course, very cursory, but what now with the time we have left, which I'd say is about 10 minutes, what can you say about this idea of these three different things? This United States that is going to be increasing its influence in countries that it had previously been backing off from, like Canada and Mexico, say nothing of Central America, possibly, South America. Then we've got Russia and Europe being forced by circumstances into a tighter and tighter relationship. And we've got this picture of China. What can we see here, in a window of periods of years, maybe, 5 years, 10 years, 25 years? What do we see here with these three elements and how the relationships between them play out on the game board? Nope. If you can hear me, I can't hear you. I know it's...
Are you getting it now?
Yes, I am.
Okay, fine. I stomped on a button on this little thingy bob. And just listen, Ollie. High tech just is beyond me. The real thing is that I see that Europe and Russia are going to come along fairly nicely. There'll be some upset with the EU, which is different from Europe, and there'll be some some contretemps here and there along the way. But I see Russia and EU getting together. I see Russia and Visegrad getting together, and I separate those two knowingly. It's just going to be the way things go. Now, I see them turning into a good, solid situation. The United States, I see, depending on how effective Trump is in the next 4 years, being better and better at what it does, which is make money and get nation states under control. Nicaragua, Honduras, Salvador, all these places are basically begging to be taken over, which means we really need to take over Mexico too, doesn't it? I mean, that way it's just one great big America, right? So I don't see that the narcotista state of Mexico has much going for it. I see that Donald Trump is going to go to war against China by going to war against Mexico. And that's going to be nice to see. He likes to be friends with the leaders he's going to go to war with. It's wonderful. I see China coming apart at the fucking seams. It's got too many irons in the fire. There's too much that they're trying to do that they really can't do. Not yet. And they've put way too much money out there in Africa. And they're going to have to spend way too much money on the One Belt, One Road system, which is fine. I want them to spend all the money they've got. Because, you see, they have tried to make there being the world's largest importer of energy into some sort of grapple hook to become the enforcer for the prices of oil and gas. It doesn't work that way. Doesn't work that way. But that's all right. They've lots of time to find things out. And God knows they've got a lovely position as a pauper state. The only thing they've got going for them to balance their energy need is our debt to them. And we're fixing to take care of that debt to them, are we not?
It would seem so. And now, what of this tripartite dynamic? because this has to be a part of the game. This is too clear a development out of previous ones, too novel in its own way. I mean,
Listen, honey, I love a good three-way.
look at, well, they're never quite as much fun as you thought they'd be. That I
No,
have
they're
discovered.
not. Yeah,
But
neither will this one be.
I wouldn't throw them out of bed for leaving crumbs. So
There you go.
think about what happened with Europe and Russia. Basically, Europe being reliant upon Russia for its energy needs, and China to some extent. Basically, the big behind-the-scenes powers, the ones associated with control of energy companies, have invested considerable time and capital, blood and treasure, so to speak, in what you used to call finding a way to try to stabilize the ruble, getting the Russian economy on some kind of a basis that is more stable. And essentially what's been happening is, like Trump just said at this NATO meeting and earlier, where he's saying, we're supposed to protect Europe, and at the same time they're paying billions of dollars for energy to Russia. The powers that be have gone to considerable trouble to use Europe to bolster Russia. At the same time, the powers that be have used the U.S. and other countries to bolster China, which means that this tripartite arrangement is one that has been in the works for quite some time. I mean,
really?
Real arrangements have been made to ensure. I mean, the fact that the U.S. economy has been struggling is in large part because of China, and the result of that is a stronger China, which yields this very situation. And again, same thing with Russia vis-a-vis the EU. It's at the cost of the EU's economic development, and it goes into Russia's coffers. And these are energy companies, which means they've been, shifting pebbles on the board for quite some time. So they wanted to create these three.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if, coming back to this idea of going from a dyad to a monad to a triad with the elements, so to speak, and accepting that the monad might have been not entirely true, though that's how it's been viewed for a time. What do we get with this threefold dynamic, and what can we say about the future in terms of what that threefold dynamic is going to yield?
It's going to be interesting, isn't it, Ollie?
And
very interesting.
And one has to wonder if the development of a white awareness, a fundamentally American conception, is being cobbled together now, because those two placed as pebbles against the single stone of Russia are eventually going to become one stone.
Really? You can't mean that. Really? My goodness. And I thought this was supposed to be an inclusive sort of channel. Oh my God. Yeah, Ollie. Yeah. It's got its moments. The thing is going to be that no matter how you slice this up, white people are going to retake center stage. And to be honest with you, Russia, Europe, and America are going to shit all over probably Mexico and a number of, like, Colombia and so on down that way, depending on what kind of pushback we get with this Mexican thing. But Nicaragua, Honduras, all that nonsense, all going to be lumped in little brown people, and they're basically going to get shit on. They're going to get taken over and told what to do. Don't have to like it. It's just the way things are going. Fine. I don't care.
Well, moving the U.S. border south to right about that area of the Panama Canal makes it a whole lot more easy to police, doesn't it?
Golly gee. Yes, it does. On top of which, it allows in a certain class of people to be guest workers under strict supervision, does it not? Oh, my goodness. Well, all our problems are solved then. uh, uh,